Welcome into the Memorial Day edition of Better Angels of Our Nature with Marcie Gourley. This weekend, many Americans are going to gather together, and there will be cookouts and parades, and flags will wave in the front yards, and families will travel, and cemetery will fill with flowers placed carefully on weathered stones, and all of that is a part of the rhythm of Memorial Day. But beneath the familiar rituals is something quieter, a pause, a remembering, a moment when a nation is invited to stop moving long enough to reflect on the cost of what it has inherited. Because remembrance is not passive, it is a sacred work. And in a culture that moves quickly, where attention is scattered and reflection often gives way to distraction, Memorial Day offers something profoundly countercultural. It invites us to remember deeply. Today, I want us to step into that work together. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's reflect on why remembering well may be one of the better angels of our nature.
Mug on the table, rain on the glass. You've been holding your breath, trying to get past the past. Better angels of our nature, sit down, stay a while. We'll name every shadow till it loosens its bite. Better angels of our nature, in the hurt, in the heart, finding room for a softer heart. Right here.
So why does remembering matter? You and I live in an age built for immediacy. News races from anxiety-inducing story to anxiety-inducing story. Conversations move fast. Outrage rises and falls in cycles measured by hours instead of years, and sometimes seconds rather than minutes, and we fall into a strange rhythm of outrage and offense, defense and confusion. The modern world rewards reaction more than reflection. And yet remembrance asks something very different of us. It asks us to slow down, to linger, to sit long enough with what has been sacrificed, suffered, and entrusted to us, that gratitude can deepen into responsibility. A people who cannot remember deeply cannot live wisely. This is true personally, and it's true nationally. Memory anchors identity. It reminds us where we came from, what was endured on our behalf, and what kind of people we're called to become. And when memory weakens, perspective weakens with it. And without perspective, gratitude slowly gives way to entitlement. Memorial Day interrupts that drift. It calls us back to remembrance. Personally, for me, Memorial Day is a day set aside to visit the gravesite of my loved ones, to clean off the debris of another year gone by, and to plant new life, new beauty, new hope. And I take time at each gravesite to thank my loved ones for their roles in shaping who I am and who I'm yet to become. I remember my grief at their loss and my joy at having been part of their lives. My love for history and our country taught me to appreciate this day as set apart. One of the stories history it taught me happened in November of 1863, only months after the devastating Battle of Gettysburg, when thousands gathered in Pennsylvania to dedicate a cemetery for the Union dead. Lincoln's line from the Gettysburg Address is one of the most profound reflections on remembrance ever spoken. He said, "It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work." What Lincoln was saying is that remembrance is not meant to end in sentiment alone. He was standing on ground still marked by immense loss after the Battle of Gettysburg, surrounded by the reality of sacrifice. He understood that no ceremony, however eloquent, could add honor to what those soldiers had already given. Their actions had already consecrated that ground through sacrifice. So Lincoln shifts focus. Instead of asking what he can say about the dead, he asks what the living will do because of their sacrifice. It is for the living is a call to responsibility. It means that remembrance is not passive observation. It is an active inheritance. Lincoln was telling the nation that the truest way to honor those who had died was not simply to praise them, but to live in a way worthy of what they had given. Their sacrifice had created an obligation for the living to continue the unfinished work of preserving and strengthening the ideals for which they had fought. There's also something deeply humbling in that phrase. Lincoln reminds us that freedom is never fully completed. Every generation inherits unfinished work. The responsibility of remembrance is not merely to look backward with gratitude, but to look forward with renewed dedication. That is why this line matters so much for Memorial Day. It gently asks each of us, what does the sacrifice of others require of my life today? I know it doesn't require guilt or performance, but thoughtful stewardship. The kind of stewardship that says, because others gave so much, I will live carefully with what has been entrusted to me. That is the sacred invitation embedded in Lincoln's words. Memorial Day, then, traces its origins to the years following the American Civil War, when communities across the United States began gathering to decorate the graves of the fallen soldiers with flowers as a way of honoring the immense sacrifice and grief left in the war's wake. These local observations became known as Decoration Day, which was a solemn act of remembrance born from a wounded nation trying to heal. In 1868, General John A. Logan, leader of a Union's veterans organization, called for a National Day of Remembrance on May 30th, encouraging Americans to decorate the graves of those who had died in service to the country. Over time, the observance expanded to honor all American military personnel who died in war. And after World War I, it came to encompass the fallen from all conflicts. In 1971, Memorial Day was officially declared a federal holiday and moved to the last Monday in May. At its heart, Memorial Day began as a quiet national act of grief, gratitude, and healing, a way for Americans to pause, remember sacrifice, and reflect on the cost of the freedoms they had inherited. As a counselor, I often think about how memory shapes emotional health. Healthy remembering allows us to integrate grief and meaning. Avoidance does the opposite. When we rush past loss without reflection, something important remains unresolved. Psychologists often speak about the importance of meaning making in grief. Loss becomes bearable when it is woven into a larger story, when sacrifice is remembered with purpose. This is true for individuals, and it is also true for nations. What we remember shapes how we live. A nation that remembers sacrifice becomes more capable of gratitude. A nation that forgets sacrifice often begins to take inheritance for granted. So Memorial Day offers us a collective opportunity to practice healthy remembering, to reflect, to honor, to integrate, to allow memory to shape us. Scripture speaks often about the importance of remembering. One of the clearest examples comes from Deuteronomy 8:2, where Moses tells the people of Israel, "You shall remember all the way in which the Lord your God has led you." These words were spoken at a significant moment. The people of Israel were preparing to enter the Promised Land. After 40 years of wandering, hardship, uncertainty, and dependence, they were finally standing at the edge of inheritance. And before they stepped into blessing, Moses gave them a command. Remember. Remember where you've been. Remember what you've endured. Remember how you were sustained. Moses understood something deeply human. When comfort arrives, memory often fades. When memory fades, gratitude quietly can give way to entitlement. That is why remembrance in Scripture is never treated as mere nostalgia. It is spiritual formation. It is the discipline of refusing to let blessing make us forget the cost of what has been given. Later in Deuteronomy 6:12, Moses gives us this warning: watch yourself that you do not forget. There's wisdom in that warning because forgetting is rarely sudden. It happens gradually, quietly, the same way erosion happens. And perhaps this is one of the reasons Memorial Day matters so deeply. It calls us to the same sacred discipline, to pause before freedoms we enjoy, to resist the drift into casual familiarity, to remember that what has been entrusted to us was secured through sacrifice. Just as Israel was called to remember in the wilderness before stepping fully into inheritance, we're called to remember the cost of freedom before casually enjoying its blessings. Because remembrance protects gratitude, and gratitude shapes stewardship. That is the sacred work Memorial Day invites us into. In 1915, standing in the shadow of devastating loss, physician and soldier John McCrae gave the world a picture that would forever shape how we remember the fallen. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses row on row that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high, if you break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep though poppies grow in Flanders Fields. This poem deeply ties to Memorial Day because it gave one of the most enduring images of remembrance in modern history. Red poppies growing among the graves of the soldiers who had died in the battle during World War I. Its vivid image of poppies blooming in fields marked by loss became an international symbol of military remembrance, eventually shaping traditions observed on Memorial Day, including the wearing of red poppies as a quiet act to honor and to reflect. The poem beautifully reinforces Memorial Day's deeper purpose, to remember that even in places marked by profound grief, memory can become a living call to gratitude, stewardship, and the sacred responsibility of carrying forward what others gave their lives to preserve. Freedom remembered becomes responsibility. Freedom forgotten becomes entitlement. That may be one of the most important truths Memorial Day can teach us. The men and women we honor this weekend did not sacrifice so freedom could become casual. They sacrificed so it could be stewarded carefully. That stewardship asks something of us: gratitude, humility, thoughtfulness, the willingness to live in ways worthy of what has been entrusted to us. The men and women we remember this Memorial Day cannot speak into our moment, but their lives still do. Their sacrifice asks something of us, to make political agreement less important and performative patriotism obsolete. Their lives inspire us to remembrance, the kind of remembrance that makes us slower to complain, quicker to give thanks, and more mindful of what has been entrusted to us. Perhaps one of the better angels of our nature is this: the willingness to remember well. And perhaps remembering well is how we become people worthy of what we have inherited. So this Memorial Day weekend, as flags wave and families gather, may we pause long enough to remember deeply, because remembrance is sacred work, and sacred work has a way of healing nations. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, head over to www.marciegourley.com and sign up for the newsletter. And of course, grab your copy of my book, 250 Great Things About America, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Whitaker House, Walmart, Target, and wherever you find great books.